Hello, everybody. We will start in 1 or 2 minutes here. Just give people time to show up. You ordered 6 different green teas. Okay. Is it too big of a meme to ask to be reminded of when the compiler is being released? I don't know what that means. Why do I drink so much tea? Because I feel like it. I don't know. I feel like it. I answer questions about compiler release date every stream, so I'm going to decline to answer that. What I really should do is put it in a frequently asked questions list at the bottom of this page so people can look. But I haven't done that yet. I was toying around with a stream where people tell me what should go down there, and then we just put it there. But that's not going to be this stream because I have an important, very important piece of programming to do today. Why did I change the position of the taskbar? Because it's dumb to have it eating vertical space. Did I go straight to bed after the previous stream and just get up? Almost. I mean, there was a little bit of padding there. It wasn't direct to bed and up. Okay. Now I got to get the tea lined up. How many hours of sleep do I aim for? I don't aim. I just go to bed when I go to bed, and I wake up when I wake up. Right now, I think I'm getting not quite enough sleep due to extraneous factors that are not the usual factors. So, normally I probably sleep a little more than average. How do we do the integration with C++ libraries? Just like anybody does. You call out to the procedures. I mean, what do you want? Do I drink flavored green tea? Not too often. If I drink a flavored tea, it's probably white tea, not green tea. Someone is asking, did I arrange for the sub money to go to charity like I once talked about? Not yet. I just now got this signed up. I don't think there's a way through Twitch to arrange to send it to charity or something. So if we go that route, it would just be by me redonating the money. Um, right now, though, you're basically just funding the stream. Like maybe I could get some better equipment for it or something. But the thing, so one of the things that I do in my off time is I'm part of the effective altruism movement, which includes organizations such as Giving What We Can and Give Well, and the main thrust of that movement is to ensure that money that you're giving to charity is doing the maximum amount of good in the world and isn't just getting wasted. And the thing is, if I say, hey, donate to the channel through Twitch because it's going to charity, that by default is very inefficient because Twitch is taking a large cut of that money before it goes anywhere. So it's just not a good way to do it. It wouldn't be, I don't exactly want to say it's a misallocation of resources, but it would be an inherently inefficient way to donate to charity. So in retrospect, I don't actually think that it's good to say that, right? I think if you want to donate to charity, it's much better if you just donate straight to charity. But yeah, we'll figure it out. I'm not trying to actively, get people to subscribe or anything. You don't get anything for subscribing right now, I don't think. If you want to burn your free Twitch Prime sub, I wouldn't complain, but I'm not, the amount of money this channel is going to take in is probably negligible compared to, the cost of running our game company. So really the reason why I signed up for affiliate is just so that everybody gets quality options when the stream starts. That's one thing that I heard happens, right? It used to be we have to wait for a long time, and then people who have low bandwidth would suffer for the 20 or 30 minutes before Twitch would give them quality options, or they'd have to reload the page or whatever. So that's the main reason that we did that. But we'll see. I mean, we're winging it. We'll see how it comes out. Would I recommend going through other C++ GitHub code bases to see what is the best coding style? Or should you just stick with the style that you started? Your beginner and your code looks totally different than most of the others, and they always seem to have some things in common. It doesn't hurt to read other people's code to understand the variety of how people do things, but it's of limited utility, right? If you're a beginner, you don't necessarily know how to judge what's good and what's bad. You get a very surface impression of like, oh, I aesthetically like the way the white space is laid out or something, but that aesthetics is not based on anything deep, right? And as you get more programming experience, you understand what helps you get a deep understanding of the code at a glance, and that would help guide your style. I don't think it's that good of an idea to conform your style to a standard. I think it's much better to do what feels good to you, but you also want to be smart about paying attention and developing your aesthetic of what feels good to you appropriately. But a big part of that is just getting experience programming. What are my thoughts on donating to Doctors Without Borders? I don't know super much about the group. We did a charity drive with Humble Bundle last year, where Doctors Without Borders was one of the major recipients, and that was cool. But I have not researched them very deeply myself. Certainly, if you go to an effective altruism place and look up what they say are the most effective charities, it's not charities like that. It's like usually charities that work in super, super underdeveloped areas, helping with like neglected tropical diseases and stuff like that. And it's simply because the interventions there are so cheap that you can do them for a lot of people with a little bit of money. Why did I decide to become an affiliate and not a partner? Because they don't let you sign up for partner without being affiliate first. So I did the partner application, but we'll see if they laugh at that or what. Any thoughts on Japanese games the last years? I don't play that many Japanese games. I didn't like the last Zelda game very much. I haven't played the last Mario game. I bought the last Mario game. I have it here, but I haven't set up my Switch since I moved back. So I don't even have a TV right now to play with the Switch on. So, I'm just not that interested in those games. And that's fine. It doesn't mean they're not good games. It's just they're probably not for me. I was going to play the Mario game just out of, what do you call it? Just staying informed, knowing what's going on and what people are making. What do I think about auto formatters? I think if it's your own personal auto formatter, like in your editor that you can configure, then it's helpful. If it's something like Go format, where they say, this is the style that everybody should conform to, I don't think that's a good idea, because it'll make you less effective, and it'll make you, like, people's own personal sense of aesthetics is part of the joy they get from programming. And to quash that is, I think, a mistake at a fundamental level, right? I understand why they did it. They did it because of all the old Unix days of everybody arguing where the open brace should go or whatever. But the answer to that is just let people put the open brace where they want and learn to read other people's code. The answer is not that there's a right answer, right? When you write a lot of your own code, it's like your house. If you're living in your own house or apartment all day or whatever it is, you want to be able to decorate it the way that you like it so that you feel comfortable in that space, right? You don't want to decorate it the way somebody tells you apartments should be decorated. It's the same thing with a program, right? You're in there all day and you want it to be a thing that's comfortable for you, not that's standardized. Why didn't I like Breath of the Wild? It just didn't seem like a very good game, honestly. That's a very harsh thing to say. I mean, so the thing that I heard about it was everybody was saying amazing things about the puzzle dungeons. And I went and tried the puzzle dungeons, and they were really uninteresting. They were really uninteresting, right? And so that part of the game was not interesting. And I guess it's good enough if you don't really play puzzle games. It's a good enough like interstitial break to have around the, I'm going to stop talking about this game because people are just going to clip this and get outraged over it. I just didn't like the game. It's fine. It's fine. What about hardcore formatting of variable names? Like Rust gives a warning if you use a non-snake case variable name. No, same thing. I don't like that. That's dumb. Dumb. Personal choices are fine when the project has a couple of people. When there are hundreds of people and everyone has their own style, some use snakes. Yeah, it's not great. Well, here's the thing. Maybe that's true, but okay. If you have hundreds of people on the project, the real question is how productive is each of those people, right? If each of those people is as productive as, somebody working on a small project who's very productive, and each of them writes 40, 50, or 100,000 lines, then you're going into a large section of code for each of those people, right? Um, Now, that's almost never how it is, right? Usually, when you have hundreds of people, they're all relatively unproductive, in which case, why are you in that environment is my question, right? I think most large programming environments are just totally screwed. They just breed mediocrity and horribleness. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can see more of an argument for standardization when there's hundreds of people, but I still, you don't want to be in the thing where there's some procedure that 10 people are editing and each one of them passive aggressively changes the indentation of that one procedure. That's stupid. But the way to solve that is to just cultivate a sense of personal taste and mutual self-respect among the people who are on the team. And they just won't do, it's like whoever wrote that procedure originally just sort of owns it, and you keep the indentation the way they had it. Mostly, it's fine. It's not a real problem. Here to explain how the undo system will work. Yes, I will do that in a few minutes when we officially start, when we're done with questions. What do I think of Stack Overflow? I mean, it's mildly useful because it's so hard to find technical documentation on the web now that's good. The problem is most answers on Stack Overflow are only a little bit right and are often a lot wrong and or are the bad way to do things. So, if you're taking it seriously that's the way to solve a problem, you can often get into trouble. What do I think about security issues? That's a very broad question. I don't know what to say about that. What are the features of object-oriented programming that I do not like? I've done big rants about this before, and that's something we should have in the question and answer, or in the frequently asked questions section of the page. But I'll just say that the ideas around which OOP tells you to structure your program are not the ones that actually matter for good code. And they're also, and by good code there, I just mean code that's simple and well structured for the job to be done. But then secondly, they're also not the features that count for making fast code. They really don't do anything except fight the structure that you really need. With Apple deprecating OpenGL, the handmade approach of making games just got harder. It seems the ecosystems is converging towards a world where everyone uses something like Unity. How do we survive? I don't have a team of people to write platform-specific code. I tweet about this. I don't think it's necessarily true that the handmade way of doing code got harder just because OpenGL is not a very good target for handmade style programming in the long term. Like Handmade Hero probably does that, but it's probably only an intermediate step. I doubt that Casey would ship a GL backend except maybe on Linux where you don't have a choice. I don't know. I haven't talked to him about it. Okay. Here's just my tweet stream about, it probably won't fit on the whole page. Anyway, I don't want to re-explain this kind of stuff all the time. Could I explain why I decided to include function overloading? I thought you were originally against it. And where the language currently stands on operator overloading. I was not originally against function overloading. I was just questioning whether you need it. The reason it's in there is that if you're going to write generic code, like polymorphic style code, then you need to be able to perform operations on a variety of data structures without knowing what they are. And how do you do that? Well, you have functions by a certain name and you overload them, right? So it's really necessary as far as I can tell. Um, and that's fine. It's also something that people want for convenience sometimes. Like they just want multiple versions of a procedure that take different kinds of arguments, and why should you have to name it different things? Where does the language currently stand on operator overloading? We support operator overloading for struct types, where the compiler doesn't have to spend a lot of CPU all the time figuring it out. You can't overload operators on ints or strings or something, but on your own struct types you can. You say that hundreds of programmers is a problem. Governments are educating thousands of programmers every year. How are we supposed to make all of them be useful? Thousands of programmers is not very many. I don't know if you've looked into how many people work at various companies, but yeah, you can have, if programmers are efficient, you wouldn't know what to do with 100 programmers on one project, because you wouldn't need that many to make the software, right? The reason you think you need hundreds of programmers on a project is because most of those programmers are not very productive, right? Now, if you're a large company that can hire hundreds of programmers, then if they're efficient, you can do a lot more projects. And that probably makes you a much more viable company. So that's what you want to do. You don't want to shoehorn 300 people into one thing that should be done by 10 people, which is what usually happens, especially in the web world, right? The web world is a disaster in terms of, if you divide the output functionality by the number of programmers, it's just a historically low disaster. And I have a talk that rants about that that I should link. It's really embarrassing that nobody has noticed this, and nobody seems to care, by the way, that programmers are historically bad, like by an order of magnitude. It's crazy. It's crazy. My tweets are a proposal, not a solution which exists today. That is true, but so what? Just somebody do it. Like, get off your butt and do it. Why do you want everybody else to do everything for you? That's not the spirit of... The programmers who succeed are the ones who do things, right? So just somebody do it. If you guys don't do it, we'll do it eventually, right? So for this Sokoban game, we're targeting GL right now. I don't like GL very much, so I'm happy to replace it on various platforms. The problem is on Linux, there isn't really anything better yet. I guess we'll be able to use Vulkan there eventually. So that's fine. And then eventually, we'll ship a game on that and it'll be pretty good. And then we can eventually abstract that into some kind of an API. But why should it take that long? It's just like doing something really basic that would let you draw triangles on all these APIs with some basic selections of shaders that are not even that complicated, but just stuff like, here's a texture with RGB colors at the vertices. Here's blending or not. Just a few things. Because the hard part is, translating general shader programs across all these languages. If you don't try to do that, it's like a 1 month project or less. God damn it. If you guys are going to whine about not having that, then don't whine to me, okay? Seriously. Man up, okay? Or woman up. Something up. And solve problems. Stop whining. I've ranted a lot about Vulkan. You can read this tweet storm goes on and says some of the problems I have with Vulkan. Vulkan does not seem like it's being well done, and it doesn't seem to know what it is. Yeah, just feed my Twitter into a machine learning algorithm and people can ask it questions. Good idea. What do I think of Rust? I answer that question every stream, so I'm not going to answer it now. In Odin, you have explicit procedure overloading. That's one way to do it. Sure. Yeah. Oh, so you map the overload to the subnames. That's one way to do it. It's one way to make sure you're not making a mistake. Nostrum says, what can be done by one programmer in 1 month can be done by 2 programmers in 2 months. That is true. Now, there are limits to how productive one person can be, right? So I'm not saying all software should be written by one person, but like most people have no idea how productive programmers should really be because they never live in a world where they see productive programmers. They just never see it. So they don't know. They're miscalibrated as to what programming is. Big company MTC 743 says big companies, Google, Amazon, MS, Facebook, etc., don't hire bad programmers though. I disagree. No, that most of those companies are hiring. At any company that size, there's a spectrum of skill. There's a small number of people who are really good, like top people. There's some more people who are pretty good to very good. There's a lot of people who are just kind of there treading water and are the warm bodies. A lot of people. And you know that. You know they hire lots of bad programmers or they're crazily bad at getting work out of those programmers because just look at the small amount of functionality provided by something like Facebook or Twitter and divide that by the number of programmers working at those places. And, you know, everybody starts breaking out excuses at this point, like, oh, it has to be web scale or whatever. And it's like, yeah, that takes a little bit of engineering. It doesn't take an order of magnitude near as much as these companies are using. So the way it works, and again, I have a talk about this from a few years ago, but the way it works is the other way around. The sizes of the programming teams at these companies are not a function of what they need to do. They are a function of how many people the companies can afford to hire. So they hire as many people as they can afford to hire and as they can afford to build organizational capacity for, and then they try to get those people to build things. It's not the other way around. It's not like, oh, we need so many function points, so we need so many programmers. It doesn't work that way. And so as they hire more and more people, those people know less and less what they're supposed to be doing, and it just becomes this giant blob disaster where nobody gets anything done. You're learning to program machine language assembly on a C64 just for fun. All right. Do I think this can be a useful experience? Absolutely. Yes. You're probably not going to ship a lot of software that people use, but it's a good environment for learning, totally. Because we now stick a large number of programmers into single groups, those individual programmers are not going to get trained as well as they should be, and maybe not well enough to expand out and do their own thing. Sounds to me like a big problem is brewing. Yeah, I agree with that. There's lots of problems with that. Lots of problems. You didn't ask a question, that's okay. Can I link that tweet? Yeah, so you can read it better. Here, I'll paste it into chat. Maybe someone else already did that. How to document libraries well, that's a whole topic I can't get into right now. What about the human ego on a manager, i.e. more important equals more developers? Yes, there's a whole like political situation going on where, you know, like as soon as you hire a manager, that person is management track and they have a plan for what their career should be, and that should involve having more people under them because that's how you progress. And you as the employer, people don't really think about this unless you run companies, but for your company to be successful, you have to explicitly provide those people with a plan for how their career is going to grow, or they won't want to come work for you. And you need managers, right? So you have to promise managers that they will progress. The problem with that is that the most obvious way to do that is to say, well, you'll be in charge of more things. So you're telling all your managers that they will all be in charge of more things. What's wrong with that picture, right? It doesn't make sense at some point, but that's how companies work. Okay. How do you deal with the constant frustration, no doubt caused by the general decisions of the programming community? I think most people make bad decisions. That's fine. Most software is terrible. That's maybe not so fine. I don't know what to do about that except try to make good things. What else can you do? Someone says, all my jobs at big companies had 3 to 5 spending all their time tracking what I was doing without understanding anything about programming, which absorbed 90% of your time. Yeah. I mean, that sounds a little bit extreme, but a lot of companies are like that, right? Very unproductive. When we ship the compiler and the engine, will we divide things into standalone APIs, like standalone SoundLib, MGUI graphics, etc.? We'll do that to the extent that it makes sense. If things are hard to factor or it's not obvious how to make something into a separate library, we just won't at the start, right? So part of the idea behind with the way we ship the language is we're not going to be like C++ and have a large, well-defined standard library. It's just going to be like the libraries are what they are at any given time. So, we can learn what's good and revise them, and it's all good. So we don't have to decide that at launch. Do I know if number of employees correlates with increased stock activity? Well, to be listed on a market, like if you want to IPO, for example, or you want to get bought by another company, the way to raise your valuation is to be bigger, like hire more people. And so a lot of companies go into this growth phase when they want to get bought or they want to go public. And the problem with those growth phases is they're very inefficient because you're just bulking up. You're hiring people and you don't even care if they're that efficient about what they do because you have ulterior motives. That happens to a lot of these companies, right? Do you think a cross-platform layer in the form of single file headers like STB would be useful? Sure. Yeah, that would be great. I think that may become a little bit hard just because it just might end up being a big file, but I would be fine with putting a big file in my project. That'd be great, you know? Okay. Let's actually get started programming. So I'm going to warm up some hot tea and we will start. So we are starting in 2 minutes. I also have to change my shirt. This shirt is itchy. I don't like it. Just like you should have code your own style, you should be able to wear clothing that's comfortable to you. I don't want to be itchy while I program. I'm just going to wait for the tea water to finish boiling because it makes a lot of noise. Well, I don't know. I don't know how loud it is for you guys, but it's loud to me and it kind of bothers me. So I'll get some Earl Grey going and then we'll start. You need a shirt when Mr. Suckerman still starts a webcam through a like button. Some of us have webcams with covers on them that physically cover up the webcam. Unfortunately, you can't do that with the mics. Well, it's getting louder right now as the water gets hotter. Okay, well, it's loud to me, so we'll give it another second or two to finish, and then we will start. We will start. Okay, let's get started. Enough Q&A. I don't know how many people here followed the stream last night, probably some percentage, but I had started messing around with undo in the game. I could show this game very quickly. It's a grid-based game where you can run people around and move objects and, do things. And, the undo system had behaved a little bit, shall we say, it just had a few. Oh, undo is part of the game, I should say, right? So I tap Z, and my guy goes back to the previous square, and then the other guy I'm controlling, so like that. And the undo system had a couple of quirks, and I had started fixing those quirks. And then it reminded me like, oh yeah, there's all this stuff that has to be done. Like, well, first of all, we saw that internally undo was backing up the state of every entity in the level, even though most of them weren't changing. So that was bad. I know why that's happening, but it wasn't worth going into because we're going to change it. Secondly, getting the behavior right with the way undo works right now is annoying because what's there right now is an extension of the thing I sort of sloppily did way back at the beginning of the project when I didn't want to spend much time on it. And that version like sort of copies and clones the memory from all the entities. And it's a little more complicated than it should be for what it does. But it also, there's some ways in which it's not good. Like copying and cloning memory is not good, for example, if you want to save the undo in a save game. So right now, you know, if I do a bunch of stuff, I could be playing for 20 minutes and then be like, oh, I know what I want to do, and then undo a bunch of things, right? Maybe I play for 20 minutes and I'm stuck, and then I quit the game and come back later. I would like to be able to undo later when I come back. So whatever all these undos are that happen need to go into the save game file. And the way that we do it right now is not very conducive to all that. Meanwhile, though, one thing that makes it complicated is the editor also has to be able to support undo, right? So we can run around in this thing, ignore this shadow for now. That's like the shadow map's not being configured properly. But, you know, I can like move stuff around, and I can copy and paste in the editor and rotate stuff and whatever. And then I can undo all those things. And, well, that all has to work too. And that may put slightly different constraints on the undo system. But the summary of all of this information is that it's just time to rewrite the whole thing. And I knew that this was coming from way back in the beginning, and I kept just ignoring it because we had other things to work on, like just making the compiler better, or, you know, getting the basics of the game put together. But now we're in a pretty good spot. We're in a good spot, and I want to just rewrite this system so that it conforms to all of these goals, but does so in a way that's not about just copying entity memory, but that's about understanding exactly which slots of an entity change and serializing those in a way that then could easily be written to disk or to a file, right? So we already know about what the slots are on an entity and so forth. So like if I select a character, I've got this editor UI about, hey, here's all these fields and what are the values. So there's string fields and Boolean fields and colors, and lots of Booleans on this guy, right? You know, and different entity types have different sets of fields. So like, you know, this one has a color and whether it's powered and whatnot. So all of that is great because this is sort of the structure that we're going to use now in the new undo system. So before we were just like, oh, if the bytes of the memory are any different, then we'll clone it, which is a problem because if you have strings and the strings have the same contents, but they point to different copies, then we consider that different right now, which is probably one of the reasons why all these entities are getting copied. But what we're going to do is we're going to go down this list of properties and just compare them all one by one. Now that's probably slower, but we'll take other steps to deal with that. Hopefully that makes sense for people. This is going to get hairy. It's going to get a little messy simply because it's, you know, it touches a lot of things in the game. The game could be very broken for a while we do this. But it'll be very rewarding to have done. But so as not to break the game, I'm going to start building the subcomponents of this one at a time. So for example, I'm going to write a procedure that just, well, first I'm going to check to see if we have it already, but I'm going to write a procedure. I'm making a whole separate list for what the undo system is going to be. Like here's my lists for the Sokoban game and the compiler, and we're going to put those aside for a bit because we're going on an undo track, right? So I want to make a procedure that detects changed fields in entities, right? That's one thing we need to do. We need to serialize those changes. We need to be able to apply those forward and backwards, right? Apply changes forward, by which I mean the following. If I detect what the changes are between two entities, and I serialize those into a packed sequence of bytes that could be compressed or whatever, then if I take one entity that's not one of the ones that was compared and say apply these changes to this entity, I should be able to change it into the values of the other entity, right? So we're going to write tests for this functionality that are separate from the undo system before we go plugging it in. What else do we need? We need, well, apply changes backward, right? Although, yeah, apply changes backward. And we're just going to figure out what's the best way to do that. There's a few ways we could do it. Because you need to be able to undo and redo, especially in the editor, right? So in the editor, I drag this around, and I drag this around, and maybe, I change the color because I like purple trees, and whatever. And then I want to undo all that because I decided it was stupid. But then I'm like, no, that wasn't stupid at all, and I want to redo it. I can redo it, right? So all that has to work. So you have to be able to apply these changes in both directions. And I don't know, that's only a 4-item list, but that's enough to start with. And then once we've done that, we can see we'll probably add some sub-items to this list and whatever. And we're just going to wing it and see how far we get before we take a break. Any questions about that? And it does help if you tag the questions to me. Is it necessary that the game editor share the same undo system if they have different enough constraints? Maybe separating the problems could simplify each. That is true. Oh God, my tea oversteeped. Damn, did I really take that long explaining this? All right, I got to kick a new tea off. But it is exactly true what you say. There are trade-offs though. I don't want to maintain two undo systems, and I'm not convinced that the constraints are that different. Because frankly, there are improvements that we need for the editor as well. We're going to see though. If it makes sense at some point to break it into two systems, then we will. One other thing that's worth mentioning is that for the editor, right now we're just talking about doing undo and redo on entities. So all these things are like subclasses. It's not an object-oriented language, but you can think of them as being subclasses of entity. But eventually, maybe we want to apply this undo system to arbitrary data structures. And then eventually, maybe we want to ship it as a library that people can use for anything. Maybe not. Or maybe we only get halfway there and don't care about the rest right now. But it'll be an interesting goal to think about, while we're doing this, how do we keep it as generalizable as possible? Is there really a notion of forward and backward in the changes? Yeah, why wouldn't there be? You need to be able to go both directions. If they are just snapshots, it doesn't matter if one snapshot is older than another. Yeah, it does. So This is going to be hard to visualize without me drawing a diagram. Say I take this tree and I move its position, right? That's one change, right? So I can undo and redo that, okay? Then the next thing I do is change its color, right? Boom, it's green now, okay? If the only thing that my undo record says is color is now green, when I want to press undo, how do I know what color to make it when I want to undo the green? Well, maybe you just look back at the previous change, right? Oh, well, the previous change, in the previous version of the object, it was purple and now it's green. It's like, okay, that's fine. Well, what happens, so let's undo all this again. What happens if I move my entity as my first change, and then I go do 10,000 changes on other entities, right? Whatever changes you might want. And then I change the color to green. Well, in a naive system, I would have to look back through 10,000 entity changes to figure out what color this was. And that's not very good if you want to run fast. So one of two things needs to happen. Either any particular change here needs to carry some kind of reference to help me quickly find the previous state of the object, right? Or we need to store the previous value and the current value. Now, we've skipped over some things because the value we're not storing, if we're trying to be efficient, we're not storing every value of every slot every time we record a change. Like if I say, we moved this entity, hopefully we're just storing the position change, right? We're not storing the color change, or we're not storing the color green, or whether this Boolean is checked, or any of this other stuff, right? We're not storing the mesh name. So let's say we change the mesh name later. Well, how do you find the previous mesh name if it wasn't stored, right? Again, there's two ways to do it. One is to point back at what is the last time that that particular piece of data was changed. Another one is just to save the old value and the new value. And I think my approach is going to be to just save the old value and the new value every time. Because frankly, usually that data is smaller than a pointer. In some cases, it's not. Like if you change a string field, it's not smaller than a pointer. If you change a vector, it's not smaller than a pointer. But most of the time, it probably is. I don't know. And it's easy to think about. But we'll see. That has to, that's a fundamental issue, is like the information has to be there one way or the other. Does it being a turn-based game simplify the complexity versus Braid, introduce more complexity, or is it about the same? I think it introduces more complexity because the characters smoothly animate, yet the gameplay logic is discrete. So like there has to be a time during the smooth animation when I move from one square to the next. And that seems to be what's causing complication. Whereas in an action game like Braid, every frame you're at an official place. Like your visual position is mostly the same as your physical position. So this is actually more complicated, even though it looks simpler because it's grid-based. Okay, let me kick off this new T and then we'll start programming. We're not going to wait for it to be done this time, though. Sorry. Sorry about all the waiting before. Just like you shouldn't have to live in files of code that aren't indented the way that you want all day, and just like you shouldn't have to program all day in an itchy shirt that bugs you, You shouldn't have to drink tea that's oversteeped. That's my philosophy. Is falling instant? No. So if we slow down time, I'll go here and then slow down time. Actually, let me go over here away from the red beam so it's not so weird. So I'm going to slow down time a lot, and you'll just see, you know, I take time to go down. I popped a little bit there at the edge. Ideally, we wouldn't pop. I'm not quite sure why we're popping so. Actually, I do know. Anyway, you can see how we're sort of stopping in each square. And, you know, gameplay effects happen in each square. So if something were to kill me or whatever, like if a laser beam was firing halfway up this column, I would get killed on my way down. Okay. So, yeah, tea's about ready. We will see if we can prevent oversteeping now. Okay. So I'm just going to start writing some things. And like I said, I want to search to see if I've already written any of them. Close my Twitter. So for example, do we have a diff for entities? Okay, well, we have a lot of things with the string diff. We do, maybe. Whoa, this could help us. I just really honestly don't remember what is here. Diff entity. Holy cow. Bro. Oh, God. Ignacio added some stuff to this. I don't understand. Why are we endian swapping? Oh, right. Okay. I get it. That's fine. So we already can diff an entity. I don't maybe like the arguments to this. I don't understand why we're passing in an excluded header size. Who the hell calls this? We might just copy this to a new version of diff entity. So undo calls this. Oh, we use this. We use this for a subset of the undo system. We don't use it for everything. Okay. And this doesn't. This is weird. This is weird, man. I don't understand what I was doing here, honestly. I mean, it sort of seems like I was writing what I'm thinking about today, but then the more I look at it, the more I'm like, this is, I don't get it. Okay. You know what? We're just going to sort of copy this, but build it into the way that I want to think about this now. So this is weird because it looks like, you know, we're allocating a fixed size situation from the derived pointer. And what is the header bytes to ignore? I remember just being, this is weird because we're kind of using this diff, but we're not really using it because we're storing memory of the same size. So, you know, I think way back I was trying to do something that would, I don't know what I was doing. This is a weird in transition system and we're just going to ditch it. So I'm going to make diff entity new. Oh wait, we have apply diff down here. Who calls that? Because this is exactly the stuff I was about to write, but the arguments are not quite what I want. Okay, when we're creating an entity, then yeah, this is all more complicated than I would like. So it's going to get simpler. It's going to get simpler. Okay, we're just going to go from first principles. We're going to make a thing called diff entity new. And we're going to start just by detecting and printing the fields that have changed. Right? So we're going to say base, right? The base entity is just like what we consider to be, I don't know if you want to say authoritative value. Like this would be the old values. We'll call it old. E old and E new. And we're going to get rid of this other stuff. For now, we're just going to say what are the differences. So metadata here is what gives us all those fields that were there in the editor with the name and the type. And we compute this based on the type info that's built into the programming language that you may have seen in previous demos. However, you know, it's got a little more information in it. Like we can flag stuff to have certain properties or whatever. Okay. I'm checking really fast to see if anyone has sent me email about this. Yeah. Okay. So, well, we've got a string builder here. This is eventually going to be a parameter because we're going to want to diff a bunch of entities into like one package, let's say. Okay, the number of fields are in the leaf items. Sure, we'll assert that's less than 256, whatever. Okay, revision number is just tells us which fields of the entity are valid. So if an item has a maximum revision number, which means it's deprecated at some point, then don't export it. Okay, so now instead of this, we want to call this thing called metadata slot, which can get an item. So I'm suspicious about this leaf items thing. We're going to say, so we want, okay, yeah. The way this is working right now is we have a separate metadata for the base entity. Ugh. Okay. Here's what we're going to do. We need to have 2 loops or something. I feel like we have a metadata for the base entity. So I could either do one loop and make sure all these items contain items from the base class, or I could have 2 loops, one over the base class metadata and one over the derived class metadata. Having them all in one pile is maybe more generalizable because it doesn't assume very much about the structure of the system. But then we need to have information in there about which version number we care about, because the base entity has a separate version number from the derived class. It is an interesting question. Maybe we just say, okay, this system is a little bit generalizable to the point where you could have a base and a derived class, but maybe that's kind of what we target. I don't have a super big objection to doing it that way, I don't think. Okay, so we're just going to do it. We're going to do 2 loops. I just need to find the base entity metadata somewhere. Base entity. Oh, we have imported from base entity on the item, and we have base entity metadata. Oh, that's like a global. Okay. It's one way to do it. Okay, so we will do it in one loop. Okay. So I believe that leaf items probably only contains subclass, but we're going to verify that in a little bit, and we'll add a new field. And if we add a new field called leaf items, including base entity, we're going to eventually want to rename it to something less cumbersome and get rid of the old leaf items. So I'm going to want to deprecate a bunch of things. So I'm going to mark things as deprecate me. So diff entity, right? I'm going to say deprecate me and no check-in. No check-in will prevent our source control system from letting me check it in. So diff entity and apply diff are both going to be deprecated. And I'm going to put handling deprecate me on the list. OpenGL has a big deprecate me on it. I'll tell you that. Okay. So I'm just going to print comparing item whatever. We're going to start small. And then, you know what? Let's just do that. I mean, come on, right? And we'll just comment out all this stuff for now. Whoops. I'm just going to comment that out because we're going to mine that a little bit more. This is just it. We're just going to say what items we're comparing. And now we're going to go make a test case in main. Just before we go into the main loop, we're going to say entity diff test. I'm going to throw that at the bottom of the file. Oh, here's a bunch of BSP tests down here. Okay. My highlighter thinks new is a keyword, but it isn't. We just inherited that from C++ for some reason. Okay. Well, what are old and new? How do I make new entities in this engine? I call make, yeah. So let's make two entities. Let's make them guys. So old is make a guy, and so is new. Does that, let's just see if this compiles. We probably screwed something up already, right? Missing argument position. All right. Probably wants orientation also. Nope. Okay, so diff entity new, then serialize. Right, because it's not E, it's E old. Let's assert E old.entity type is equal to E new.entity type. You can't be diffing things of different types. That does not make sense. Okay, great. Let's move this down here because it's not even being used yet. All right. So if we diff entity new, old and new, let's not call it diff entity new because we've got this word new flying around. Let's call it, what do we call it? Diff entity 2018. Because that's what year it is. That's kind of cumbersome, but whatever. And let's call this, okay? So we're comparing item, can push, multi-push, pull, teleport, immunify, transport, charm, can take gems, boop, 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 boop. We are not comparing the base class items at all. The base class is stuff like position, orientation, and whatnot. Now, interestingly, this X, Y, and Z What are those? It's after move sound. Old position. Yeah, that might be something we get rid of eventually. But anyway, those are the things. So this is, you know, we have code that does something now. Isn't that great? Doesn't really do something, but it does something. Okay, so as I said, I want to do I want to loop twice? It may enable me to be faster. Yeah, let's loop twice. Let's just worry about the derived items, and then we'll make it work on the base items. The reason why it may be faster to loop twice, I will reveal when the time comes. So here we're going to compare these items. And instead of doing this direct pointer calculation, I'm going to call something called metadata slot, where we take the entity in the item, and it checks if it's imported from the base entity and does this, otherwise this, right? So metadata slot of, well, slot old, e old, comma, item. Slot new is metadata slot e new, comma, item. So we're going to have a speed note here. Speed A. In the end, we will know whether we are looping over base class items or derived class items, so we can elide the if in metadata slot. I'm making such a complicated speed note because I know we're going to want this to be fast later. B, we call metadata slot twice, but in reality we should make a version that computes 2 pointers for 2 entities at once, probably. Maybe it won't matter. I don't know. Okay, that's our speed note. But right now we're just making this work. So we call slot old, slot new. Those will be pointers to this base class. And then I'm going to do this. Differing is slot old, slot new, runtime size. Now, if differing, we're going to say differing item whatever, otherwise same. And we don't have to put the word item. We're just going to put the name of the field. And if they're differing, we'll make that easy to spot on the left column. There we go. So nothing should be differing, right? Whoa, we're crashing. We're crashing. Okay, one other thing occurs to me, though, before we figure out what's going on there, which is just, I don't want to have to Control-C the program every time. Like, I'm working on this in I'm just going to return from main here, if that works. Yeah. So I think we are crashing in entity diff test, and because we're running, no, we're printing exiting. That's weird. Oh, this should be an else. We're not crashing, we're just not printing anything because we're dumb. All right, same. All these are the same between the two entities, which is exactly what we expect because we just constructed two entities, we didn't change anything. Now, let's make some changes. So I'm going to say new.gems in inventory is 10. New.hasPromise3 wand is true. New.can teleport is true. New.old position.y is minus 100. All right. That's not what it's called. Is that on a subfield? Oh, there's no underscore here. All right. Differing can teleport, differing gems in inventory, differing has promised 3-1, differing y, differing component. That works great. I think I spotted a question earlier. No, we haven't done the closed release yet. We're working toward it right now. Not right this second. This isn't strictly toward the closed release, but broadly speaking, we are working toward the closed release. Okay, any questions about this thing that we just did? This is like our cornerstone situation. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say builder is a string builder, and we're going to we're going to pass a builder in here. This is going to get a little weird how to structure this, but yeah. Okay. So if they differ, then we are going to add fields. We're gonna record the information about what differs, right? So where's Ignacio's byte swap? Here we go. We're going to do this, and we want to store the index of the field. Now, the complicated thing is we might have to remap this. Field index is its index. Version handling. We're going to write that down. So what's going on is we want to be forward or backward compatible, right? So if somebody has a save game and then we modify some entities, we want to be able to load that save game. And in order to load that save game, you need to know which fields from the old version map to which fields in the new version. And we tend to do that using a thing called the type manifest. But for the purposes of making undo work correctly in game, we don't care, because when you're in the game, all the entities are the same version, right? You're not loading old data. So we can make this whole system work just fine without handling this additional complication, and then we can add the additional complication in. What happens when you, the player, moves one character and then another which crosses the path of the previous one? The player then undoes the first one such that there's a collision now. That's not how that works. Undo shouldn't ever be able to take you into a state that wasn't there in the first place, right? So I'm not sure what you're envisioning, but it's not how it works. Okay. So we're going to put into, this is the data, but we don't want to put the data yet. We want to put into the builder just an integer, right? A U8. Let's look at, because I feel like Ignacio added some things here. So I'm going to go put n bytes. Is that here? It's here. Now we don't need an endian swap. Look at all this. Look at all this that I did. I remember doing these. We have a type manifest. We have all this stuff. Wow, I was really doing some work way back, and then for some reason I didn't do it all the way. I did serializable procedures. What? Holy cow. I was working. Okay, well, anyway. Anyway. So when we say put, we ensure contiguous space. Okay, this is all fine. Incomplete. This is great. Since we're going to be running on a little endian machine, we don't have to write this part until we port to like some other CPU. That's great. Put n bytes with endian swap. No, we just put into builder a U8 of field index. Now, like I said, this is going to want to be a tight loop, right? But at the same time, because we want undo in the game to be fast, but at the same time, if we're loading an old save game, you know, it might be slower. So this is a case where we might use polymorphism to generate two versions of this procedure, in one of which, you know, some of this stuff is if-def out, right? Like, you don't need to cross-reference the field index if you know it's up-to-date save data, like you would be saving during gameplay. So, yeah. Yeah, okay. This is going to be a little weird when we, yeah, ugh. I don't know. We're just going to wing it. We're just going to do it like we do it. Okay. So we get the field index. We put the field index, and then we put the bytes in here of slot old, slot new. We're just going to get this out because who knows if we will change that under some circumstance. Okay. So we do that. So really this shouldn't, redefinition of builder. Where is it? Oh yeah, down here. We don't need that. We don't need this and this. Okay. Put, oh. Right. We are passing this as a pointer now. Okay. So, in string builder, we're going to say result is builder to string. No, not here. What am I doing? I want to be. Result is builder to string builder, right? And print bytes data result.count. So now, boom, this is what we saved. And you notice there's a lot of zeros in there simply because, you know, when you have an 8-byte number and one of the values is a 0, or one of the values is small, you have 7 bytes worth of zeros. All right, let's see. So can teleport, that's a Boolean. So field 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. I don't know why we have 0, 1 here. That's weird. Can immunify 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's this B. Or no, gems in inventory, right? And that is, we seem to have an extra 0 here all the time. Oh, because this is a, why are we writing 2 bytes here? We're writing the index, and then we're writing a 0, and then a 4-byte, right? And then another 4-byte, what? Wait, what did I do? What did I do? This is what happens when I program too early in the morning. So we put the field index. Oh, we're probably storing the old and new value, right? Which is, I wanted to do anyway. Yeah, okay. We're storing the old and the new value. So that's fine. So this 0 is not a redundant byte. It's the old value of the flag, new value of the flag, right? So for B, which is gems in inventory, the old value is 0. The new value is A000, right? When I was highlighting these, I was doing big endian, but like I just said, we're little endian. So A000 is the number 10 as a 32-bit number, right? And then field E, which is going to be, has promise 3-1, old value is false, new value true. 19, which is going to be that Y coordinate. Old value is floating point 0, new value is floating point something. So this all looks correct. Component, what was component? Component, I don't know what that is. And I don't know why that differs. Let's fuck is component? Oh, that's a member of a vector. That's like a union member of a vector 3. Okay, here's what happened. Is this serialization system was written before we added some stuff to the type system. So if I go to math, so our vector can be referenced as XYZ or by this component array. And these are placed over each other. This is like a union, but a different way of expressing it. And this is redundant with that, so we don't want the undo system to pay attention to it, but it currently is, and that's bad. So we want to fix that. You're saying, oh, I thought you were making it so you can undo things separately. Well, no. What's going to happen is anytime that we perform an undo snapshot, we'll find every entity in the world that changed since last time and store them all together and undo them all together. Yeah, because you want it to be transactional like that. You don't, like, we're storing one entity at a time right now because that's the building block that we use to build the whole thing, but you want it to be transactional. Okay. So that's good. Anti-diff tests. It's fine. So we need to figure out how to ignore this. And it's tricky because so what I'm going to do is when I'm registering the metadata, which is a cheap place to put more if statements because that only happens once at startup, I'm going to say, look, if our memory position of this item ever goes backwards, we're just not going to record it. And that means you won't need manual markup on these items. And that's good because, you know, I don't own vector 3. It's in like the math library. So I don't want to have manual markup on this. So metadata. Okay. So we are going to make a thing that says highest offset is -1. And if it dot, is it? Yeah, that's something else. Okay, down here we're actually handling real numbers. If it dot offset in bytes is less than last handled less than last handled offset, continue, discard unions, etc. It's a good thing that I decided to modify y here randomly, or I wouldn't have noticed that. So, so now we actually need to have last or highest handled offset. Highest okay. highest handled offset equals it dot offset in bytes. Plus it dot runtime size, right? Because yeah, it dot type, yeah. All right, we do not any longer pay attention to component. You'll notice we have many fewer bytes than last time, because last time we said, oh, this vector3 differs. So we store the old value and the new value, and it's like a lot of bytes. Whereas now, our data is much smaller. So that's pretty good, frankly. It's a good place to start. Any questions about that? How are things going in chat? People are chilling and being quiet. People are chilling and being quiet. Okay. So we're just not going to print same anymore. We're just going to print the things that differ. That's great. It's more terse. Now, I want to add the base entity as well. Silence is better than flame wars. That is true. Oh, is Handmade Hero? Oh, you're watching recordings of it. Will there be some kind of additional quick save system in the game in SSR? It's often awkward to navigate 200 undo steps just to try a different solution. Well, I mean, certainly in those games, you can press R to reset the level, right? We're going to have something better than that, because I agree it's very tedious. Either we'll have something like Shift-Z to navigate you to the last major change, you know, because a lot of the times if you're trying to rewind, it's just like, oh, I walked from this square to that square or whatever, right? Whereas if you really go to like, go back to the last time I pushed a block or something, that'll let you navigate faster. But also, you know, we might have a scrubber or something down at the bottom. I don't exactly know. But yeah, I get annoyed at the rewind systems in those games. It's just, you know, right now we're building the foundations and not the UI. We do have checkpoints. We have official checkpoints in the undo system. It's just they're used relatively rarely by specific game modes. They don't address the specific problem that Guitar Freak is asking about. Okay. Okay, so we have, we're writing bytes of differing fields only so far for derived slots. I'm going to factor this into a routine that takes two parameters. We're going to say, well, many more than two actually. Compare item e old e new builder revision number, right? And we're just going to put that in there and get rid of this, right? So we're going to do that. And we're going to say inline here. And we're just going to put compare item here. Because why not? Compare item takes ye old as an entity, ye new as an entity, builder as a string builder, revision number is an int. Oh, and item. We need the item. Like, we don't even, you know what? Just get rid of this. Okay. So because we can make sure this is inlined, I don't feel so bad about factoring it out, except this is a little bit of a lie right now. We don't actually implement that ourselves. I think we just hint LLVM to inline it, and that's not the same. So we're going to eventually make sure that's forced. But for now, we're just trusting that it gets inlined. Yeah. All right. So the question is, will this magically work if we call it with the base entity revision number? Let's try it. For base entity metadata.leaf items, we compare item leaf items, we do the same thing, right? Compare item. Can only continue from within a loop. Return. It's the old continue return swaparoo. Field index. Yeah. Okay, that makes it a little revision number. Procedure. Oh, because I've got to pass the index. Can't just declare it and expect the compiler to know what to do. All right. What's that going to do? Well, it didn't discover spurious changes. So now we want to go edit those actual fields and see if it picks them up or if I screwed up something badly. So we're going to say new dot. Here's the base entity. Where is it? This undoable entity data is what gets recorded. The things that are not marked no serialize. Which, like, why are these in undoable entity data? What the fuck? Yeah, we're gonna have problems. This probably should go away. Undoable entity data.map. Okay. Well, we're probably going to want to tag some of the stuff. So the materials here, for example, can be changed in the editor and we want to undo those, but in the game, it's not the case, right? So there's that. And we're also not, so you'll notice so far when we record any, or when we record slot changes, we're just storing the, we're comparing and storing the memory, which is not what we want to do for strings, and it's not what we want to do for complex things like materials. We'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to that. Okay. Here we just want to make sure the base slots. So we're going to say group ID 77 new dot override color dot y is 1, override color dot z is 0.37, and new dot z when falling started is 10. Okay, so these are base entity items. These are sort of derived class items that are on Guy. Let's see what happens. Group ID, YZ, Z when falling started. Hey, that's great. That's great. We diffed them. We have all this data stored. Beautiful. Now, we're going to make it fail. To cut down on the amount of noise, let's get rid of this and get rid of this. So now there's just going to be like 2 items, one from old and one from new. Now we're going to do the following thing. Old dot entity name is copy string hello sailor, and so is new dot entity name. These are going to have different pointers, but they're the same. And we're going to detect that they are different, even though they're not different. Right? Entity name. Whoops. That's bad. So we want to address that. And then we're going to want to figure out some of all these other types and things. Okay. Well, it's not strictly bad. Like we could come up with a rule that strings in the entity system are deduplicated and always point to the same thing, but I don't know if that's the right approach. It might be, it might not. Like the thing is, we're trying to make this a sort of a more generalizable thing that anybody could use in a library. Maybe we'll get there, maybe we won't, but the more we intentionally move away from that, the worse it is, right? Okay. You think struct x s32 place y s64 will fail, but maybe that is okay. That will fail currently. But it's, yeah, I mean, we probably should warn about that. I'm going to write down to warn about that or something. Warn about XS32 place YS64. Because that's just like you're feeding it a data structure that you're kind of being annoying about, but you might unintentionally do that. So it is a good point. Okay. These first 2 items detect change fields in entities and serialize those changes. We can cross those off as long as we write down, well, we didn't detect changes in strings and materials, etc. So we get to cross out 2 items. We replaced it with 2 items, but the 2 items are like closer to the goal now. So that's kind of how we do it sometimes. how we roll. Put little dashes next to those, meaning those are the next steps, maybe. Let's do strings. I think I'm going to do strings and then get some breakfast, because I feel like I'm going to be working on this all day today, and we're going to do many hours of streaming today. We've already been live for 2 hours. Maybe I should have prepared for meal delivery and all that so we could go nonstop all day, but I didn't do that. So we're going to take breaks in between streams today. Also, this is like I said last night, this is a mission critical component. So I don't want to work on it when I'm too tired, because you make bad mistakes that affect a lot of things and take hours to debug. So taking rests will be good. In one of the lines of code, you have an if statement or two statements need to be true, so you AND it, but one of the items is Boolean and Boolean, but you use one AND. Why is there two ways to do AND? No, if I'm not sure which lines of code you mean, but single ampersand is not a Boolean AND. That's a bitwise AND. It's just like in C. So maybe that's a mistake that the compiler somehow isn't catching, but I suspect it's not. I suspect it just may be unclear to viewers what that code is. We're not done yet. We're not done yet. We got to do strings. We got to compare strings successfully. Once this works and no change is detected, we'll take a break. Actually, maybe we'll do a fun thing also. How general is this game engine? It looks too geared towards Sokoban. We're making a specific game. This is not the Unreal Engine, right? That said, if you wanted a game engine to start with, it's not a bad idea to take a specific game and branch out from that. It's a very good way to work, actually. And so when we build these individual components, we're not trying too hard to make them generic, but we're also trying to not make them too specific, right? Like, we want to help you repurpose this for what you're doing. But I don't want to go overboard trying to write some generic thing, because that usually doesn't work anyway, because you don't know what the other person's going to want. The way you figure that out is like through years of working with customers to figure out what they need, which also is why open source engines don't ever get much traction, because open source people don't do that because they don't have product mentality, which is a whole other rant that I rant about frequently. What's the current sub count? I don't know. It's probably like, I don't know how to see that. Let me see. I'm curious. Now you have me curious. It's not high because we just started the stream. How do I know stream summary? Stream duration? How do I know the total number of... There are 22 subs to this channel. Dude. This is, we're going to beat Shroud by tomorrow. We've got 22 subs. Shroud has 50,000 subs. We're only 3 orders of magnitude off. It's great. Does the Sokoban engine now have any backend helper functions ease porting to, say, Metal iOS? Not right now, but it will, hopefully. Dude, we got more subs. 2 people just subbed. 5 people just subbed. Wow. Dude, it's crazy. Look at all this. Let me reload my sub page. It still says 22. I guess it doesn't refresh that often. Or maybe people subbed before let's force reload. Yeah, it still says 22. I don't know. Maybe it updates every hour or something. Okay, let's get back to working. Is it true that they don't have product mentality or that they have limited time and energy to do that? Well, I don't think it's the latter, because if you had limited time and energy to do it, but you understood that it was important, then you would be doing that instead of like random forking of a Linux distro to make inconsequential changes, which is in fact what open source people do most of the time, right? So the total amount of time isn't what matters. It's how you apportion that time to the work that needs to be done. Is the 1 million sub thing still valid? I forget what I said would happen at 1 million subs, but sure. Sure, why not? Released to Twitch chat only, maybe. I mean, so the initial release of the compiler is going to be closed door, right, to a very small number of people. But after that, the plan is to gradually widen the release. Maybe we say people who have been Twitch subs for 3 months or more. No, I don't know. It's stupid. Like, again, I don't want to be trying to drive subs to the channel or something. This is not the way that I make a living. So it just would be funny. It would be funny. Twitch plays compiler programming. Okay, let's do this work here. We have some flags and whatever. And we do different things depending on what it is. So we need to go back to this. So we're going to do this. So if it's pod, then we do this. Otherwise, we're going to do this. If we hit something we don't understand that changed, we are in a bad way. Otherwise, here. So for strings, well, so if they're strings, then this memcomp was conservative. Because if the strings pointed to exactly the same thing, then we didn't get here, right? So for the case of strings, the memcomp above was a conservative detection. If the strings are byte equal, then they are obviously equal. But if they're not, they could point to two strings of the same length, but with differing contents. That is what we check here. Okay, s old colon equals cast to speed. We could speed this up by not checking the length, I guess, since it is known to be equal. Okay, So we want to cast a pointer to string slot old. Cast pointer to string slot new. If s old is not equal to, let's call it s new. So we're just going to use the compiler's strcomp here. Then, okay, what did we do before? Oh, this. Easy. Easy peasy. Okay, so here we say differing, and then here we say differing. Oh, we're taking address of the builder again. This is a pointer parameter now. Hey, look, Z1 falling started in Y. We're not detecting a differing hello sailor. That is good. But let's go here and change this one to hello sailor question mark. These are the same length, but different contents. Now let's see. We should detect it. Differing entity name. That is good. That is good. So now I can cross off the strings. We don't handle materials and so forth yet. And I'm going to have to figure out what to do about that. I suspect we're going to have an is this for the editor flag that we propagate down. But it is time for my breakfast break. Are there any questions about what happened here before we go to break time? Oh, we have a question up here. Oh, it's about the open source thing. There's a lot of that, yes, but I also don't think these small forks have people in them who care about developing a product. They just want to attach their name to something. But that's what I'm saying. Some Linux distros definitely think about this, i.e. Arch is absolutely different from Ubuntu, and the devs think differently about the product and their audience than, say, Canonical does. That's true, but A, I think that's really a small minority of people. And B, they don't take it seriously enough. I mean, I don't know about Arch specifically, right? But like, Ubuntu doesn't take product mentality seriously enough. I'll tell you that right now. And they're considered to be one of the most product-y groups in open source. So if they can't do it, yeah. Am I going to get into, we're going to stay away from off-topic questions right now. Am I going to get into how not to save things like animation state details later? Well, we already have some things for that. So, you know, we tag things as no serialized, for example, and those are skipped already. Like these things don't get recorded by the metadata system. So we skip over them. We don't even consider them when we're diffing entities. That already works. However, sometimes there are things like, well, you know, I was rotating toward a certain heading, and then I decided to move. When I undo, I don't want to be in the middle of that rotation again because it's not a gameplay relevant rotation. We'd rather just snap to the target to be clean. That kind of a thing like you can't quite say generically like this because it depends a lot on gameplay logic. And so for that, I think what you do is you just write a function that's like, this is the procedure that fixes up values either before undo or after undo or something, and applies those. So we actually have both mechanisms, and we'll tune those as we get further through here. Am I going to make a profit out of the programming language? No, it's going to be free for everybody. Is there an explain like I'm 5 on the project and where we are in development? Unfortunately, there isn't. If you're curious, you can go to the YouTube channel and just start watching videos. It's a lot of material though. We are going to release some summaries and stuff soon. I don't know exactly when. We're working toward it. How do those tags work? These are notes. They get attached to declarations. These are language level constructs, and then we parse them at runtime. It goes through the regular introspection system. We have demos about that on YouTube if you're curious. I don't remember which one, unfortunately. Maybe someone can point you at that. Would I recommend to watch the archive as a beginner? I don't know. I mean, maybe. I would just say if you started to watch some things, if it's way over your head, then maybe not. But if you kind of get it, then maybe it's fine, right? I don't know. Just see if you are interested. All right. It is now break time. I am going to get some fuel so that my brain is active for the upcoming programming that we will need to do. I think maybe what we do is we start plugging this stuff into gameplay first, and we don't worry about the editor. We of course have to make the editor work before we check this in. But the gameplay is simpler because we don't worry about trying to undo pointer values and stuff, I think. We'll see. We'll see how it rolls. Thanks everybody for coming by. And we will start up again, I don't know, probably more than an hour from now. I'm not sure exactly when. We will see. Thanks for coming by. We will continue. I want to have a good undo system maybe by the end of today. Maybe it'll take longer than that. You know, what we upload to YouTube and all that. See you later.